Right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Carl Soule, and I actually come from the Adobe Hollywood team, working with filmmakers and broadcasters, television show producers in and around the Los Angeles market. And part of what I do is teach people best practices when you're working in things like scripted drama, or if you're working on a feature film and utilizing Premiere. One of the things about Premiere is it's extremely flexible in how you produce your content. It really is designed to work the way you want to work. Now, if you're in an environment where you need to work with other individuals, let's say you need to go out to a different tool like Baselight for color, or you're planning on doing your audio is getting turned over to an audio post house that's going to do the final mix for audio. You need to make sure that everything that you're doing inside of the applications is going to be compatible with that. There's a lot of metadata that drives a lot of these traditional workflows in places like Hollywood. And Premiere can do an excellent job working in these environments. But the key is making sure that you prep your files correctly so that when things get handed off to a third-party utility, a third-party tool, that everything works together. And the audio sound engineer, when they get the project, everything lines up. They can line up back to the original master files. All the data is there. It's all good. So what I'm here today to show you are just some of these best practices and talk a little bit about how we work and what the best tools are for doing these various tasks. Now, one of the first things that I want to talk about is simple ingest functionality. A lot of people, when they are bringing in media clips, nowadays we live in this wonderful world where most of the media files that we're working with have these lovely human-readable file names like A002, C003, 18072. Wouldn't it be nice if that just said like scene 2? Normally when we ingest files, if you use an old drag and drop method, or even if I use the media browser to ingest these files, the names of the files within my project are going to be the names of the files on disk. And oftentimes it's the job of an assistant editor to go through and kind of correct for this. There is an easy way of working, and this is something that a third-party company like whoever is the DIT on set, whoever is generating dailies, oftentimes in addition to the media files will include a small file called an ALE file. Now, this is a text file that contains all of the extended metadata that can't live in the original source media. And not a lot of people are aware Premiere actually reads ALE files. It's possible to import an ALE. So a better way of getting started with my media, rather than going through the process of going into bringing in all those clips, having to add all that metadata information from scratch, I can actually select an ALE file and choose to import the ALE, and I can get a lot more metadata within my project if I need to find out what's going on with this. By using an ALE file, you'll notice that I have shot information. The clips are named something that's a little bit more human readable. I can tell at a glance what these are. Now, there is one extra step because typically an ALE file doesn't contain the path for the clips. So in this case, I do have to come in here, and you'll notice the file name on disk is not missing, even though I'm using a different file or a different name within my project. That doesn't affect how I look for the media. So by linking one of these files, very quickly it's just going to line up and link everything else together. Now, the metadata that you can see within the Premiere Pro project, there's a lot more metadata that you can work with than what you typically see. The columns within the project file actually have there's a lot more potential columns that you can reveal within your project. I have some here you may have never seen before. Who knows what CDL values are here? Familiar with? I see a couple hands. Very common now, CDL stands for Color Decision List, and it's a nice, easy way of bringing some basic color information along with the clips. Many cameras, you can actually add CDL values on camera. They're simple number values, it's 9 numbers, that make it sort of like a way of painting the picture a little bit to give it more of what we actually want the end result to look like. You'll notice I have metadata columns in here for ASC CDL values, log notes. If I right-click here and choose metadata display, I can bring up a lot more different types of metadata. And in a lot of cases, the Hollywood team, we actually have our own engineering team. And over the years, we've added many, many more columns that didn't used to be there. We now have that capability inside of Premiere. Working with the Coen brothers on Hail Caesar, we actually needed to add key code information because that was, it's important workflow for a film shot on 35 millimeter film, which we thought would go away by now, but it's not going anywhere. So we still need the ability to work with film. We need to have the key code data so that we can line back up to the negative. So we now have things like key code metadata columns within Premiere that I can add. I can create my own layouts for this. And Premiere even features the ability to blow up any panel full screen, except my keyboard is the wrong kind of keyboard. I can do it the manual way. Normally it's the grave marker. It's usually right under or next to the escape key on a keyboard, but I always have the ability to make any panel full screen here by choosing, where is it? Now this is one of those cases I'm so used to using a keyboard shortcut, I'm forgetting where this is found. There it is. Maximize panel group. Bam. Now this is probably the least sexy demo of Premiere you're ever going to see because all I'm showing you is essentially an NLE being used as a spreadsheet. But this is an important part of the overall process, is being able to see this information. Now something we've also been working on is the ability to update this information. Many times, even if somebody has kind of rushed through and given us a lot of the metadata information, sometimes they may forget certain columns. Some metadata maybe wasn't available, it didn't get added because there was a rush to get the clips out before the weekend. We now have a special function in Premiere that if I work with an ALE file to start with, if somebody gives me an updated ALE file with additional metadata information, I can choose this metadata command here to say update metadata, get the new and improved ALE file, hit update, and it will actually add additional information, additional columns into the metadata that were not there before. So I have this other nice ability to be able to just jump through and get additional information if I have started with an ALE file. So you see how important that can be. And again, ALE files are text files. They're human readable files. Let's go ahead and make that small again. So it's very, very easy for somebody to update. You can actually open up an ALE file in an Excel spreadsheet and work with it, or any type of spreadsheet tool, and work with it from there. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about just briefly, you'll notice that there are color values with a lot of these different shots. And I'll just go ahead and select one of these shots and open it up over here. Let's bring the source monitor over here for the time being. Now, in some cases, we can actually apply effects based on the metadata automatically for you. One of the areas that is of great interest to the Hollywood team is the idea of a non-destructive workflow for color when dealing with dailies. So obviously, most things are shot in RAW these days, but the editorial process is still, in a lot of cases, using some kind of a proxy or offline media, usually something like DNX or QuickTime or a ProRes file. So in many cases, the color information gets baked into the file. And a lot of people want to be able to take that or strip that information off. So we're working on some different tools to make that happen. You'll notice on the left-hand side, there's an effect up there that's actually called ASC CDL. So these are the live CDL values that came over from the footage. Now, in combination with this effect, we can also apply LUTs using the Lumetri effect, and the two together, put in the proper order, can give us a full non-destructive workflow for color with multiple LUTs being applied to the footage, the CDL values being applied to the footage, so that with a single toggle switch, I can go back and see the original raw clip. So if I want to make a determination of, are the highlights really blown out in this shot? Let's go back to the raw and check it. It can be as simple as a one-click button. So more and more we're starting to see this in operation, people wanting to use this. All right. The next thing I want to talk about is syncing picture and sound. And again, this is one of those cases when I work in Hollywood, most people are still, sound, picture, completely separate crews, completely separate groups. We're fortunate, though, in a lot of cases, they actually use the same jammed time code for both the audio and the video. There are many different ways inside of Premiere Pro to sync picture and sound. If you want to do turnovers, if you are going to hand off your Premiere Pro project to somebody who's doing the audio and a third-party tool such as Pro Tools, there's one recommended way of doing it. Anybody know what that is? Multicam. I may have a prize for you at the end here, so stick around. So with Multicam, most people would not think of Multicam. They'd probably think of something like merge clips or put the sound in the timeline and sync it up that way manually, then link the clips together or something like that. Multicam has a lot of benefits because every other method of doing synchronization within Premiere would involve finding the shot, finding the sound roll that goes with the shot, selecting them both, and then merging them or synchronizing them or doing something else. Why Multicam is so powerful to start with is that I can do select all, create Multicam. In this case, I'm going to sync on time code and hit OK. And it's done. Now it's telling me something here. It's saying, oh, wait a minute, I couldn't synchronize some of the clips. That means maybe the sound rolls are missing. Well, let's look at what it created. It figured out, take 1, 2, 3, 4. It figured out greatness, but it didn't figure out the B-roll on the shots. Okay, I don't expect to have synchronized sound with the B-roll shots. That's fine. But it goes through and it'll automatically place anything that it can synchronize will end up in this process clips folder. And so I'll know at a glance what has synchronized and what hasn't synchronized. The other thing about working with Multicam that's great is at any point in time when you're working with Multicam shots, sometimes the time code drifts a little bit. If you've ever done a synchronization using time code and suddenly you look at the shots and it's like 2 frames off, this happens. I can always open a Premiere Multicam in a timeline view, and what this is showing is sound, camera 1, camera 2. So it basically gives me the ability to line these shots up. So if I wanted to look through the markers on these and find where the marker is, and then turn off the other camera, I can step through this and see, that's actually off by a couple frames there. There's the clip on camera 2 or camera 1. So I might have to nudge this clip over a little bit just to get it in perfect sync, because there is a little bit of time code drift on this. So I always have this ability. I have the ability to go back into a timeline view for any multicams that I've created. Now I'll talk about the benefits at the end of the workflow much better, but the cool thing about this, I very quickly kind of skipped over how I created the multicams. I'm just going to quickly do a little section of this again just to show you guys. If I grab these and grab these, and say make multi-camera source sequence. There's a couple of little tricks in here that I know, and I'm going to share them with you now. First off, I am setting the audio to camera 1. Oh? Why am I setting it to camera 1? Camera 1 has a little bit of magic built into it. If your sound is a separate file, guess what automatically gets chosen? The sound roll. So in this situation, even if I had temporary sound on the cameras, if I select camera 1, it's actually going to look for, if it sees a WAV file, it knows you want the WAV file, and that is going to be the audio that it uses for synchronization. The other thing that is also useful is by checking this use clip names down at the bottom here, it helps with the metadata process. It's a good habit to get into. It's not necessary, but it is a good habit just as far as how certain things flatten in the timeline to turn that on. Otherwise, you can use the same methodology if you have sound timecode information. Sometimes the sound timecode is different, but it's actually found in the ALE file. So you see how each of these bits and pieces of the workflow kind of tie in together. So that's why it's important to understand these different best practices. If I started with an ALE file that gave all my picture clips an alternate timecode to sync to, I can then use sound timecode as a new feature in Premiere that enables me to sync based on the sound timecode information. So picture and sound can have different timecode values and still line up. Okay, now as far as project organization is concerned, we do have a couple of different methods of doing collaboration. If you'd like to see something called team projects, definitely come by at 11 o'clock each day of the show. We are showcasing something called team projects, which is a collaboration tool that's designed to use the internet to share your project information. In Hollywood, we don't typically see a lot of interest in those types of workflows because of security reasons. A lot of people are required to work under what are called MPAA regulations, which means no connectivity. So in those situations, we actually have a separate way of working that allows for collaboration. A typical feature film maybe will have one lead editor and maybe up to 5 assistant editors that are prepping things and needing to work together and share sequences, share prepped material, bins back and forth with each other. Premiere can now do that. We have 2 features that work together that make this happen. I can actually open multiple projects at the same time, and we have something called bin locking or project locking that enables me to lock down certain sections of a project. We also now have the ability to create these shortcuts that we call shared projects. Each of these icons here points to another Premiere Pro project living on the disk. And we have a metadata column here that shows who has the project open. So only one person can open the project to make changes to it. Sound familiar? If you come from other platforms, this may look a bit familiar because it's a known workflow and we wanted to make sure Premiere could adapt to this. Now, if you want to leverage the cloud, Team Projects is there, it works great, but we created this for Hollywood so that a group sharing storage could work together and have that ability to pass files back and forth. Now, just because somebody else has the DMG, or this person here, the DMG lab in the back, has Reel 3 open, I can still actually open this up, but it will be in a read-only mode. So in other words, I can't make changes to this, but I can at least open it up and start to look at it, but it won't allow me to actually make any changes to it. If I wanted to make changes to something else, like Reel 1, sure, I can open that up. And since we have some new audio tools, you're seeing a couple messages there dealing with that. So you can see IBC Stage currently owns Reel 1. Now, if the other editors wanted to look at Reel 1, they could. They could double click on it. It would open in read-only mode for them, but they could not make any changes to it. If they tried to move something in a timeline, it would not allow them to do it. It has a lock on it. To set this up, the only thing you need to be able to do is on every machine, go to Preferences, Collaboration, and turn on project locking. Give each workstation a unique name. You could put Edit Bay 1, Edit Bay 2. I could put, Carl and Jason. I could put my phone number, their phone number, so I know who to pick up and call when it's Friday and I need to have somebody unlock a file. All we're doing to make these locks happen, and this is kind of hush-hush, is there's a little PR lock file that lives next to the Premiere Pro project file. If that lock file is there, it doesn't let any other copies of Premiere open it up. But it's actually very, very simple to delete that file if something catastrophic happens and you need to get in and make changes to that. So don't go deleting the lock files just because I told you this. That'll ruin the system. But just know from a troubleshooting perspective, it's not like permissions in Mac or Windows that require a lot of rebuilding or anything. It's pretty simple, but very effective. All right. Last couple things I want to show you here before I run out of time. It's becoming more and more popular to shoot in a different aspect ratio from what we're delivering. Premiere Pro is extremely flexible. We are format agnostic. We can work with anything up to 26 megapixels in any direction. So we have people cutting things like 10K by 1080 for big video walls. That's definitely a possibility. 8K, a lot of different aspect ratios, 2:1, 2.4:1, still delivering in 1.78. Very, very common workflow. Just know when you create a sequence inside of Premiere, you can create it based on a preset here, but know that you have the power to make your own presets by choosing custom. You can set this to any aspect ratio, any resolution. Just think about what you're actually delivering. Rather than having to put a matte with black bars, you can actually set your timeline to the aspect ratio you're delivering to. And that way, when your footage comes in, you can see this is a 1.78. I'll look at the sequence settings here to see what we have. This is a standard 1920 by 1080. This clip, if I go to properties, is 2592 by 1080. And that's probably some fraction resolution of like 6K original footage that it was actually shot on. So this is very common. 2.5K is my proxy file. But you can see I have a lot more room on the left and right edges to reframe my shot if necessary. And most editors have gotten into this groove of being able to just look at a shot and hit match frame, the F key, load it in the source monitor, and now immediately see what is the full frame that we're working with. I can do that here as well and make some additional editorial decisions if I want to do reframes. Now, if your footage, if the offline media that you're working with is a perfect fractional resolution of your high res, when it's time to conform this, to go back to the original 6K media, if they are a fraction of each other, any positioning that you move in Premiere will be a perfect reposition in using the high res footage. So the importance there is when you're getting your dailies delivered, rather than saying, just give me 1920 by 1080, burn black bars into it, the better thing to do is to actually say, make me a copy of whatever they happen to shoot in that day. If it was 8K, give me a 2K version of this and at the correct aspect ratio so that I can work with it in Premiere. And that way, any repositioning I do here is going to be correct when we go back to do the final reconform. Okay, I'm almost out of time here. There's a couple of other tips and tricks that I just wanted to quickly point out here. Let me jump over to this project for a second. If I need to load a particular scene into the source monitor. This is a common workflow that I see from people coming over and transitioning from Avid to Premiere. We have a keyboard shortcut that you just should be aware of. It's something called Make Subsequence. And we even have a new one here that was just added this year called Make Subsequence from In to Out. And the idea behind this is you're late in the editing process, you've delivered the editor's cut, and now you're working on the director's cut. Okay, I've got a whole scene here. It's got 20 layers of audio, temp audio design. It's got a bunch of different visual effect shots on multiple tracks. It's a very complicated section. How can I trust to use a lasso tool to grab absolutely everything to move it to where the director wants to reposition this? Make subsequence is your key. Use make subsequence or make subsequence from in to out ignores track targeting. It's just everything in the in to out range. When you do that, it will load that in the source monitor for you automatically. Makes it very, very easy to cut it in someplace else. A lot of people think you can't take a group of clips and load it in the source monitor. You can use this make subsequence. This does also create a bin item. You can rename that and go back to it, call it, the one scene that the editor doesn't like where it is currently. Okay, well, now I have a way I can load that into source anytime I want, and I can go back and I can move it around. All right, last but not least, export. Premiere has a wide range of different ways of doing exports. Couple quick things to note. If I'm working with a sequence and I need to export for audio, we do still support OMF. OMF is a deprecated format, though. It's not something that's getting a lot of love and attention. The preferred workflow for most modern workflows going to Pro Tools would be to use an AAF file. Premiere automatically, there's that little step. I don't know if you saw it. It was really quick on the screen. It said simplifying project. What is that? That means it's going through and finding anything that is a multicam and flattening it down automatically for you, so that everything going out in the AAF file will line up to the original source footage. It's not nested. With an AAF file, if you export an AAF file once, and then you export a second one to the same directory, someone made some changes, but now we need to export a new one, but all the footage is the same, all the audio files are the same. Why do I have to export all the audio files again? If you export an AAF file to the same folder, you don't have to. Premiere is smart enough to know, oh, look, you already have all the audio there. Here's the new AAF file with the editing changes. Good to know. XML, very quickly, the one secret I like to show people if you're trying to get something using Apple XML out of Premiere, if you don't have a timeline selected anywhere and you choose File Export XML, you're getting the entire Premiere Pro project. Many other tools don't like that. It's too many sequences, it's too much data. Just make a point of saying, I want this sequence. So when you choose to export an XML file, you just get that one sequence. You're going to have a lot more success. I get a lot of tech support calls on this, and this is like, it's a simple thing, but people don't realize that you can do an entire project as an XML. The last thing that I wanted to quickly talk about, and this is kind of a going back in time a little bit for me, I don't think the EDL format has really changed much in 30 years. I think the last change to the spec for it was probably 1984. But we do still support EDLs. They're still a big part of the Hollywood-based workflow. We have been adding additional formats and additional functions here. These are not part of the original documented spec, but they're very common in Hollywood. If I need to go out to do color information, if the color dailies had LUT data, they had CDL information, I need to make sure and pass that off to the colorist so they know what the starting point is. We have checkboxes for that now. We have checkboxes for sound roll information to make sure and pass that across. So EDL files, while it's a very ancient format, it's still a very common format to use. So these are just a couple tips and tricks. that I wanted to share with you from my time. I've been working in Hollywood now for a few years, a number of different feature films that our team touches. We have our own engineering group in Hollywood because these little connective workflows are very, very important to us at Adobe. We have our own engineers that can work on these, and we work one-on-one with high-profile customers. And all the features that we create for them, you get in the next release of Premiere. So there's even more fun stuff that's already being tested that you may hear about in the near future. Thank you guys so much.